People don't change in hotel rooms. That's what they say. You check in, you check out, you're the same person. But room 237 knew better. This hotel was built at the end of the 1800s. 4 stories, 60 rooms. Nothing remarkable. Nothing special. Just a place where people stayed when they needed somewhere to be that wasn't home. Room 237 was on the 2nd floor, middle of the hallway. Not the best room, not the worst, just average. Average size, average view, average price. The kind of room that nobody requests. The kind that gets assigned when everything else is taken. But there was something about it. Something the hotel staff noticed over the years. Something they never quite explained. People who stayed in room 237 always left different. Not different in obvious ways. Not transformed. Not reborn. Just different. Quieter. Or louder. Calmer. Or more determined. Like something had shifted inside them during the night. The room itself never changed. Same furniture. Same wallpaper. Same carpet worn thin by decades of footsteps. But one thing remained constant. One thing that had been there since the beginning. The mirror. Large. Wooden frame. Dark wood carved with simple patterns. Nothing ornate. Nothing fancy. It hung on the wall opposite the door, so that anyone entering would see themselves immediately, face to face with their own reflection. The mirror had watched everyone who ever stayed in that room, watched them enter, watched them leave, and if mirrors could speak, this one would have stories to tell. Stories about the soldier who stood before it, trying to look brave. The woman who couldn't meet her own eyes. The man who practiced smiling until his face hurt. The mirror saw them all. Reflected them all. Remembered them all. Hotel staff came and went. Managers changed. Ownership transferred. Renovations happened. But the mirror stayed. No one ever thought to replace it. No one ever thought to move it. It belonged there, in room 237. Watching. The first story the mirror remembers clearly was near the end of the Great War. A young soldier, 20 years old, maybe younger. He'd lied about his age when he enlisted. They all did. He checked in late, after midnight, carrying a single bag. Wearing civilian clothes. His uniform was folded inside. Tomorrow morning, he'd put it on. Tomorrow morning, he'd take the train. Tomorrow morning, he'd ship out. But tonight, he was still just a boy. He entered the room, set his bag down, looked around. Then his eyes found the mirror. He stood there for a long time, just looking at himself, trying to see what everyone else saw, trying to see a soldier, a man, someone brave enough to go to war. But all he saw was a scared kid who missed his mother. He had a letter in his pocket. She'd given it to him at the station, told him not to read it until he was alone. He sat on the edge of the bed, unfolded the letter. Read it slowly. She told him she was proud, told him to be careful, told him she'd pray every night. She told him it was okay to be afraid, that brave men are afraid. That's what makes them brave. He folded the letter, put it back in his pocket, stood up, walked to the mirror, looked at himself again. This time he stood straighter, shoulders back, chin up. He practiced the posture, the expression, the face he'd need to wear tomorrow. He didn't sleep much that night, but when he left in the morning, something had changed. He looked fear in the eye, his own fear, in his own reflection, and he decided to go anyway. The mirror watched him leave, uniform on, bag in hand, walking like a soldier now, different from the boy who checked in years later, after the war ended, after the world tried to rebuild itself. Two people checked into room 237, a man and a woman, not married, not to each other anyway. They gave false names at the desk, paid in cash, asked not to be disturbed. The clerk knew. Everyone always knew. But it wasn't his business to judge. They entered the room quietly, nervous, guilty, excited, all at once. But when the door closed, something shifted. They weren't having an affair. Not really. They were having a moment of honesty. A moment where they could be themselves, without pretending, without performing. She took off her wedding ring, set it on the nightstand. He loosened his tie. They stood before the mirror together, side by side, holding hands, looking at their reflection, at what they could have been, should have been, in another life. They talked for hours about dreams they'd given up, about the people they become to please others, about the versions of themselves they buried. They never touched, not the way people having affairs touch. They just talked and looked at themselves in the mirror, seeing truth for once. When morning came, they knew it was over. This moment, this honesty, this brief freedom. She put her ring back on. He straightened his tie. They stood before the mirror one last time, not holding hands anymore, but still together, still truthful. Then they left, separately, 10 minutes apart. She went back to her husband. He went back to his wife. But they'd both seen something in that mirror, seen who they really were, underneath everything. And you can't unsee that. You can't unknow yourself. They never spoke again, never contacted each other, never tried to recapture that night, because it wasn't about each other. It was about seeing themselves clearly. Just once, the mirror reflected that truth, held it, kept it. The 60s brought different kinds of guests. A woman checked in alone, late afternoon, wearing sunglasses inside, long sleeves in summer. She gave her name, paid for one night, asked for a quiet room. They gave her room 237. She climbed the stairs slowly, like every step hurt, unlocked the door, closed it behind her, set her small suitcase down, took off her sunglasses. The bruise under her left eye was dark, purple and yellow, few days old. She walked to the mirror, looked at herself, really looked at the bruise, at the split lip that had just healed, at the way she held her left arm carefully, at the stranger staring back at her. She didn't recognize this woman, didn't know when she'd become her, didn't remember the moment she'd stopped being herself. She sat on the floor, back against the wall, staring at the mirror from across the room. Hours passed. The light through the window changed. Evening came, then night. She didn't turn on the lights, just sat there in the growing darkness, looking at her shadow in the mirror. Somewhere around midnight she stood up, turned on the bathroom light, washed her face, looked in the mirror again. This time she didn't see a victim, didn't see someone broken beyond repair. She saw someone who'd survived, someone strong enough to leave, someone brave enough to start over. She took off her wedding ring, held it for a moment, then dropped it in the trash. When she checked out the next morning, she didn't go back, didn't return to the house, didn't collect her things. She just left, started walking, kept walking. The mirror had shown her the truth, that she was still there, underneath the bruises, underneath the fear, still herself, still whole, still capable of leaving. The 80s brought a different kind of desperation. A businessman checked in, middle-aged, expensive suit, leather briefcase. all the markers of success. But his hands shook when he signed a register. His eyes were hollow. His company had collapsed. Bankruptcy. Losses. His name in the newspapers. Everything he'd built for 20 years. Gone. He couldn't go home. Couldn't face his wife. His children. Couldn't walk through that door and admit failure. So he came here. Room 237. He set his briefcase on the bed, loosened his tie, poured a drink from the minibar, stood before the mirror, looking at a stranger. This wasn't supposed to happen. He'd done everything right, worked hard, made smart decisions, played by the rules, and still it had all fallen apart. He raised the glass, ready to drink, ready to numb it all. But he stopped, looked at himself in the mirror, really looked at the man holding a glass of whiskey at 3 in the afternoon, at the man hiding in a hotel room, at the man who'd rather disappear than face his family. Is this who he was? Is this who he wanted to be? He set the glass down, slowly, deliberately, sat on the edge of the bed, head in his hands. He stayed there for hours, not drinking, not moving, just thinking about what mattered, about what he'd lost, about what he still had. His company was gone. His reputation was damaged. His savings were depleted. But his family was still there. His wife, his children, still waiting. He didn't have to be the man who ran, who hid, who gave up. He could be the man who faced it, who admitted failure, who started over. When he left the next morning, he didn't take the drink, left it sitting there, untouched. The mirror had shown him two versions of himself, the one who gave up, the one who kept going. He chose. The 90s brought a young man to room 237, 22 years old, college student, home for the holidays. He'd rented the room for one night, told his parents he was staying with a friend. He needed time, space, privacy. Tomorrow he was going to tell them. Tomorrow everything would change. He sat on the bed, then stood, then paced, then sat again. He'd rehearsed the words 1,000 times. In his head, in his dorm room, in the car on the way here. Mom, Dad, I need to tell you something. I'm gay. Simple words. True words. Terrifying words. He walked to the mirror, looked at himself, tried the words out loud, quietly at first. I'm gay. His voice cracked. He'd try again. I'm gay. louder this time, steadier. He practiced different versions, different tones, different approaches, casual, serious, apologetic, defiant. None of them felt right. He sat on the floor, back against the bed, staring at his reflection. Why was this so hard? Why did the truth feel like a confession? He wasn't sorry. He wasn't ashamed. He was just tired of hiding. Hours passed. He cried. He breathed. He practiced. By morning, he'd said it 100 times. To the mirror. To himself. To the empty room. I'm gay. The words didn't sound strange anymore. Didn't sound wrong. Just sounded true. When he checked out, he drove straight to his parents' house, sat them down, took a breath, and said the words. The mirror had given him practice, had given him his own face to say it to first, had shown him that he could speak his truth and still be himself. The 2000s brought a writer, mid-30s, successful. 3 published novels, awards, recognition, and complete creative paralysis. She'd rented room 237 for a week, brought her laptop, her notebooks, her favorite pen. She was going to write here, away from distractions, away from expectations, away from pressure. She sat up at the desk, opened her laptop, stared at the blank screen. Nothing came. She tried the bed, the chair by the window, the floor. Nothing. She looked at the mirror, at her reflection, at the person who used to write effortlessly, who used to have stories pouring out. Where had that person gone? Days passed. She filled pages with false starts, with garbage, with words that meant nothing. She'd sit before the mirror, asking herself questions. What was she trying to say? Why couldn't she say it? What was blocking her? No answers came. On the 5th day, she stopped trying, closed the laptop, put away the notebooks, just sat, looking at the mirror, at herself, and realized something. Maybe she didn't have anything to say right now. Maybe that was okay. Maybe silence was an answer too. Maybe forcing words was worse than waiting for the right ones. She'd been so afraid of not writing, of losing her identity as a writer, of disappearing. But the mirror showed her she was still there, even without the words, even in the silence. She was still herself. When she checked out, she hadn't written anything worth keeping, but she'd found something more important. Permission to be still, to wait, to trust that the words would come when they were ready. The mirror had reflected her patience back to her, had shown her that sometimes doing nothing is doing something. The most recent guest the mirror remembers came just after a funeral. An older man, 60s, gray hair, tired eyes. His husband had died after 40 years together. Sudden, a heart attack, no warning. He couldn't go home, couldn't face the empty house, the empty bed, the empty everything. So he came here, room 237. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at nothing. The mirror reflected him, alone, small, lost. He talked to his reflection, quietly, like he was talking to his husband. Told him about the funeral, about the people who came, about the things they said. Told him how much he missed him, how the world felt wrong without him in it. He cried, then stopped, then cried again. Hours passed. He kept talking, kept telling stories, kept saying all the things he hadn't said at the funeral. The mirror listened, reflected, held space. By morning, he talked himself through it, not over it, through it. He understood now that grief wasn't something you get past. It's something you carry, but you can carry it and still keep living, still keep moving, still keep being. His husband wouldn't want him to stop, wouldn't want him to disappear into the grief. When he left, he went home, to the empty house, to the life that would never be the same. But he went. He didn't hide. He didn't run. The mirror had given him a space to grieve, to speak, to be heard, even if the only one listening was himself. Over the decades, the hotel staff noticed patterns. Not everyone in room 237 changed, but many did. The housekeepers saw it. The way people looked in the morning, different from the night before. Some cried, some laughed, some sat in silence for hours, but they all spent time at the mirror, looking, thinking, deciding. One housekeeper, Maria, worked at the hotel for 40 years. She cleaned room 237 thousands of times. She noticed things others missed. The way some guests moved the chair to face the mirror. The way others stood for long periods, just staring. The tissues in the trash. The untouched beds. The notes left behind. Once, she found a wedding ring in the wastebasket. Another time, a resignation letter, written but not sent. She never mentioned these things, never told anyone. It felt private, sacred somehow. She just cleaned the room, made the bed, replaced the towels, and left the mirror exactly where it was. Maria knew something others didn't. That room 237 wasn't just a room. It was a space between who you were and who you become, between the lie and the truth. The mirror made you look at yourself, really look, without distractions, without excuses. And sometimes that's all people need, to see themselves clearly, just once. In 2024, the hotel closed permanently. The building was old. Repairs were expensive. The neighborhood had changed. It was time. Maria was there for the final day. 40 years. And now it was ending. She walked through the halls one last time, remembering, saying goodbye. She stopped at room 237, unlocked the door, stepped inside. The room was empty, furniture removed, carpet pulled up, just bare walls and that mirror. She walked to it, looked at herself, at 40 years of aging reflected back. She'd spent her life cleaning rooms, making beds, erasing evidence of human presence. But this room had meant something. This mirror had meant something. She reached up, started to unhook it from the wall. It was heavier than she expected. Solid wood, old craftsmanship. As she lifted it down, something fell from behind the mirror, landing on the floor. An envelope, old, yellowed. She picked it up, then saw another, and another. Behind the mirror, tucked into the small space between frame and wall, were dozens of notes, papers, different sizes, different ages, some decades old, some recent. She sat on the floor, started reading. The first note was written on hotel stationery, faded, from the 1940s. I came here as a coward. I left as someone willing to try. No signature. No date. Another note. Notebook paper. 1960s. I came here as a liar. I left ready to tell the truth. Another. Torn from a journal. 1970s. I came here broken. I left as someone who could heal. More notes. Different handwriting. Different decades. I came here lost. I left knowing the direction. I came here as someone's possession. I left as myself. I came here ready to give up. I left ready to fight. I came here hating myself. I left learning to try. 12 notes total. 12 people. 12 transformations. All tucked behind a mirror. All saying the same thing in different ways. I changed here. In this room. Looking at this mirror, Maria read them all. Slowly, carefully, she thought about all the guests she'd never known, all the stories she'd never heard, all the moments of transformation that happened in this ordinary room. The last note was newer, written on plain paper, recent handwriting. I came here thinking I couldn't change. I left knowing I already had. Maria folded the notes carefully, put them back in their envelopes. She looked at the mirror one more time, at her reflection, at the 40 years written on her face. This mirror had watched it all, had seen every transformation, had held every truth, and now it would go into storage, would be forgotten, would become just another piece of old furniture. But Maria knew better. She knew what this mirror had done, what this room had meant. Some places have power, not magic, not supernatural, just the power of space, of solitude, of reflection, the power to make you stop, look at yourself, and decide who you want to be. Room 237 is empty now. The hotel is closed. The mirror is in storage somewhere, wrapped in blankets, waiting for nothing. But the people who stayed there, they're still out there. Changed, different, living proof that transformation doesn't require grand gestures. Sometimes it just requires one night, 4 walls, and a mirror that refuses to lie. The soldier who looked brave until he became brave. The lovers who found truth in pretending. The woman who left her ring in the trash. The businessman who didn't take the drink. The young man who practiced coming out. The writer who learned to wait. The widower who learned to grieve. They all stood before that mirror, saw themselves clearly, and made a choice. The mirror didn't change them. Mirrors don't change people. But mirrors show you who you are. And sometimes seeing clearly is enough. Sometimes when you stop running from your reflection, when you stop pretending, when you stop hiding, something shifts. Not because the room is magic. Not because the mirror has power. But because you finally looked, you finally stopped, you finally saw. And once you see yourself truly, once you face what's really there, you can't go back. You can only go forward. Different, changed, transformed, not into someone new, into someone more honest, more real, more yourself. That's what room 237 offered. Not escape, not fantasy, not comfort, just truth, reflected back, unavoidable, undeniable. And for those brave enough to look, For those ready to see, that was everything. The hotel is gone. The room is empty. The mirror is in darkness. But the changes remain. The people remain. The truth remains. Because some places don't need to exist forever. They just need to exist long enough. Long enough for one person to see themselves clearly. Long enough for one transformation to begin. Long enough for one truth to be told. Room 237 did that. Thousands of times. For 100 years. And the mirror remembers. Even in the darkness. Even in storage. Even forgotten. The mirror remembers everyone who ever stood before it, everyone who ever looked, everyone who ever changed. It remembers the moment they saw themselves, the moment they decided, the moment they walked out different. That's what mirrors do. They remember. They reflect. They show truth. And sometimes that's all anyone needs. One mirror. One moment. One truth. And the courage to look.